21 years experience, so that means one of two things. Either we know what we're talking about, or we're just getting really old. So hopefully it will be that we know what we're talking about. I'm not going to try to scare you when I talk a little bit about crisis communications, which is what I'm going to focus on. And I hope you will never have to face a gauntlet like that in your municipal careers, because that's a fairly daunting thing to have to look out at. But what I want to try to do is just walk you through what we view as some of the key things in crisis communications. I'm going to start off with what we look at as a definition of crisis. And by that I mean we're not talking about a tax increase at a municipality or a couple-inch snowfall that you have to push off the streets. We're talking about things that really could derail what it is that you do in the public sector. Potentially the loss of life of an employee, loss of life of a resident of an employee, something as odd as, in my career, from one time I was a newspaper reporter. I was covering up American Township, and some of you probably have been around the county. Not many of you students, but this is probably going back way before you were even hanging around. But in 1996, they had a gas line that broke near the King of Prussia Mall, and ended up shutting down the turnpike, 22 miles of the turnpike, shutting down the King of Prussia Mall, shutting down a bunch of businesses in that area. So strange things do happen. Those are what we look at in terms of crises, and really what we're talking about in terms of crisis communication. If you do response well, you see a bounce in the way your organization proceeds, you see a bounce in your reputation. If you do them poorly, you may be bounced. So the point, the point being, these are important moments in time, and one of the things I'm going to stress is through planning that you get through these well and get through these successfully. We look at it in four phases: readiness, response, recovery, and reassessment. Something I said. I think it was Mr. Tommy Allen.
Go.
Nice recovery.
Crisis communication. He has a crisis plan. So again, readiness, response, recovery, and reassessment. These are all fairly self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time going into them, and I'll touch on them a little bit as I walk through it. But key things are, you have to sit down in the beginning, and one of the things we believe strongly in is think about what can happen. That's sort of the readiness phase, and you prepare a crisis plan, and one of the key things is having a plan, we believe strongly in. But then your response, your recovery is, you got to go back and sort of understand what did happen, and the reassessment is fix something in your plan that didn't go well, because I promise you not everything's going to go well no matter how hard you try. Fix something within your staff that didn't go well. Go back and make sure that you're prepared for the next time around, because there will be a next time around. So here's what a plan looks like. These are some of the key elements that we believe should be in your crisis communications plan. And one of the things that's important is the crisis communications plan differs from your crisis response plan. We're not talking about, from a communicator standpoint, how to manage your way through the issue. We're talking about how to manage your way through interacting with your various audiences that are watching what is going on or a part of what is going on. So, and here you've got your scope, your key messages. These again are all self-explanatory, but they take time to put together, they take time to assemble, and they take time to test. This is not a plan that should be put together and then, 10 years ago it used to sit on someone's desk, and then someone would leave and you'd go to have something happen and you'd go look at the list of who's going to be doing what, and you'd find out that Craig left 3 years ago, but Craig had the keys to something, or Craig was the point person on something, and now who do we find who's taking Craig's place? So living, breathing documents. Now they travel on flash drives, or in some cases folks have got apps for them. Some larger cities and municipalities have apps for them where they reside on your smartphone. But the key thing is, these are the elements that are important. These are the elements that you ought to be able to have handy. Holding statements, for example, something that you want to try. I'm going to show you in a few slides a great holding statement. Things that you want to have available at the ready, so that if something happens, you don't have to assemble your team, draft something written, run it by your solicitor, and then be able to get it to the media, because the game will already be in the fourth inning by the time you get that work done. So you have something already prepared in your plan, and you're ready to go at the drop of a hat. What does your crisis team look like? These are some folks from a municipality, a public sector standpoint that we think are key players on your crisis communications team. Obviously, your communications lead, somebody within your organization who is charged with being the front person for you and talking to the outside world. That's probably not going to be, for those of you who are managers or hoping to be managers, that probably shouldn't be you, because you're going to probably be the person in charge of navigating your way through the incident. So you have to think about whether it's an assistant or somebody else within the organization. If you're not a municipality that has a PIO, in some cases I know some of you do, in many cases I know some of you do not. Find out who's the person who's really good, able to talk with the media, understands how the media works, understands social media, can think quick on their feet, can write. Somebody like that is really who you want to try to find within your organization, if at all possible. And then you've got other positions here, obviously, that are critically important. Legal, there's usually a running theme that PR people and legal people don't get along. We hope we do get along with legal folks. We believe strongly that they need to be part of your team, your crisis team, because stuff you are writing, stuff you are saying should go through them in some capacity, but you have to make sure you've got a good relationship and there is an understanding that time is important and things can't be reviewed for 45 minutes, or there'll be 4 more iterations of a draft statement that is needed by the time that thing gets green lighted. So, but make sure they're part of the team and cognizant and aware of what you're sending out. This is, we lifted this from a plan, just to give you an idea of kind of how things might flow from an activation standpoint. And as you can see, you've got the chief operating officer, in this case, in many cases, it might be the manager, says, you know, we've got an incident we're going to declare. We've got an emergency. You might then contact your crisis communications person, and then it trickles down to he or she calls somebody on the support staff and activates the team. The team gets together, whether it be, depending on the nature of the incident, you might have them get together by conference call as they're driving to the township building, if you'd like them to come to the township building, so they can be briefed on what's going on, so that when they get there, they understand kind of a little bit of the nature of what the incident is. Then you've got the team meeting and starting to talk about what they are recommending from a crisis communication standpoint. You might be pulling out holding statements, looking at them, beginning to draft them. You've got a website. You might be doing something on your website. You might be preparing to do something on all your social media assets. And it trickles down to, at the end, your communications lead, and then going back to the incident manager, township manager, whoever's in charge from an administrative standpoint, and saying, these are our recommendations. This is what we believe we should be saying. These are the mechanisms for which we want to say it, and probably also including this is what's coming in, because it's just as important to listen to what's happening around you as it is to be pushing out. There was some recent research, and I'll throw it out there. How many organizations, both public and private, it's a percentage question, have a crisis communications plan? Fire away.
We have a crisis communication plan. We have it attached to our COOP plan. We activate it in national emergencies. I work for the federal government, so it's a little different than municipal.
That's cheating. There's a percentage of a national research. There's a percentage of organizations that do and don't.
Half? 50%?
About 54% have, 46% do not.
Wow.
So really, what we ended up talking about is, the Boy Scouts are the folks who have the plan and drill on the plan. The person in the middle, how many do you know? Let's see, can anybody know who?
It is.
Right, Evel Knievel. So I was fascinated with Evel Knievel when I was younger. Anybody who wants to kind of jump across the canyon seems to sort of caught my attention. So, and it's one of the few times I've ever had a chance to work Evel Knievel into a slide in a presentation. But daredevils, they're folks who've got sort of a plan, maybe test it, maybe don't test it, maybe got their fingers crossed that something isn't going to happen, but they at least have sort of realized that they probably need one. And then there's the folks on the far side who have their head buried in the sand and hope nothing ever happens, and if they do, they're going to be running out the back door, screaming and pretending that it didn't happen, and you might not be able to find them by cell phone or anything else. So key thing is, again, try to develop a plan and try not to be the guys on the right. Our tips. First one, assess what can go on at your organization. And by that I mean understand all the vulnerabilities that you might have. And you can accomplish this by bringing your staff together at some point in time, maybe with a facilitator, maybe your own. just start brainstorming, sticking Post-it notes on a wall. We could have Superstorm Sandy hit. This time last year we were still in the throes of recovering. This time the year before that, no one had envisioned the 100-year storm of the 100-year storm that Sandy turned into being. So you go down, we could have an employee die in an accident. We could have an employee kill someone in an accident. We could have financial mismanagement. All the different things, the vulnerabilities that you believe that can happen to your municipality, pull them all together as scenarios, and then work your way through what we might do in each of those. What can we do to address it? What can we do to eliminate it? Now, there's obviously certain things you can't eliminate as vulnerabilities, but we once worked for a major food manufacturer. They produced lots and lots of food that you eat at Golden Arches if you happen to frequent a place with Golden Arches. And we were out doing a tour of their facilities and walking through crisis training with their facility managers, and we were sort of a road trip. We went through one facility and they had a metal detector. We went to a couple other facilities and didn't. As we were driving from point A to point B, we were talking, and I said, well, why at one and why not at the other? And the answer was, we don't know. And we said, well, that's kind of opens you up to potential vulnerability, because if something happens at the facility without the metal detector, meaning someone brings in a weapon and there's a workplace shooting, you're going to be exposed to why was there one here and why wasn't there one at the other facility. So we talked it through, and they went ahead and put the detectors at all facilities. Point being, this is a good way of sort of looking at where your weak spots might be, and it's not weak in terms of an organization not performing the way it is. It's just a weak spot of vulnerability of things that do and can happen in everyday life. So sort of assess your organization. Usain Bolt, really fast. Things happen fast when you're in the throes of a crisis. You're not going to have time to start making things up in the moment. You have to be prepared in advance. You have to have the plan. You have to have the holding statements. You have to have your people prepped and understand kind of how they need to react, not all of a sudden bring them together and say, this just happened, here's what we need to do. As an example, this shows Twitter volume around a incident that you're all familiar with in the past year. Anyone want to take a guess?
Boston.
Is that Paul?
Yes,
Yeah.
Boston?
Yeah, it's Boston Marathon. This shows you, the time is Greenwich Mean Time, so it's a little bit off. 10,000 at this point in time at the start of the race, or right before the bombing, there were 10,000 tweets related to the race. Just people talking about family running, where are you at, different things like that. As you can see, within 10 minutes after the bombing, it spiked to 750,000 tweets. And then it went to, you can see it peaking at about 900,000 tweets. So in the moment, and obviously those of you, you're all in MPA programs, that's obviously something on a smaller scale that could in fact happen at a race that's run through your community or another event that's kind of run through your community. So you don't have time to start running around trying to figure out how to do things. You have to really have your assets in terms of communications, your way you're going to react to people. They're going to be television, they're going to be print media, there's going to be folks coming at you in droves. It happens quickly. The time to get ready for it is before it happens. Know your audiences. Not all audiences are created equal, but know the people who are important to you. Have lists of how to contact media, how to contact senior elected officials at the federal level, at the state level, at the county level. Have lists of people you're going to need, like Larry, like folks in Delaware County at Larry's, for an example, who you might want to call on to have come in and help you and assist you. Know how to reach employees who might be critical, who might be away. School districts, all these different things. You have to be able to understand your audiences, understand how you're going to communicate with them, know which ones are more important than the other, because again, as I said, not all of them are created equal. Some of them are going to be more of a help to you in terms of influencers and word of mouth than others might be. Some of them are going to be more important from a standpoint of being able to mobilize folks. If you want to do a briefing at a certain place, you might need to go to a church and go into a community and be able to talk to someone there who can help you get access, or help bring folks in so you can do your briefing. So know the audiences that are really important to you in your community. Know the tools that are important. And by that I mean the communications tools. How does your website work? Who runs it? How can you do it? Some folks have dark websites, so they sit there. A lot of organizations, some that we work for, something happens on a significant level. The nice picture of the park or the kids playing on the playground equipment goes away. You put up a sort of static looking information site that then you're able to communicate what you want to do, and you're not sort of left with this incongruous image that's not connected to what is actually going on. A lot of large companies will have these parked and will do the same thing. Website, know how to, again, how do you get to media, social media, what assets do you have? Do you have a Twitter handle? Do you have Facebook? Do you do Pinterest? Do you do Instagram? All those different type of things. Who's the person who knows how to use them? A company called Everbridge recently just did some research. They do mass information text systems and things like that. 58% of organizations that have crisis plans had no plan in that on how to use social media. And on the public sector side of it, they were then followed up and said, well, why don't you have that plan? And the answer was, well, we don't have enough staff to do social media. Well, as you saw with Boston, other folks out there do social media. So you have to figure out how to be part of the conversation. You can't be left out of the conversation. Which leads to this, which is speak. You can't go dark for 15 minutes. You can't go dark for an hour after something happens while you're preparing your first statement, because you will miss not one news cycle, because there isn't a news cycle anymore. You will get left out of the story, even though the story you might be the critical player in the story. So long gone are the days where something happens and you'd have an hour to sort of sort things out. You have to move very quickly, and again, that's why those holding statements and the dress rehearsals, tabletop drills, all those things are critically important, but you have to have a voice. You have to be in and potentially, as best you can, lead the conversation, because if it's happening in your community, you're the key element in this. Equally important to have a way to listen. So listen to those key influencers that I mentioned, the elected officials. What are they hearing? What are your supervisors hearing? What are your commissioners? What are your council folks hearing? What are some of the other people who are key players in your community? What are they hearing? Ask, have a mechanism, and good plans will have people tasked to certain audiences, so that way you don't have one person who's responsible for every audience. So they'll make sure that Craig's responsible for the ministry in the community, so he's going to keep touch with all the pastors and the priests and things like that. Larry's responsible for the elected officials. He's going to keep in touch with those folks as things are going on. Social media monitoring. You have to have a way of being able to use any of the multitude of tools out there to listen and monitor what folks are saying about you, and then obviously you want to listen and monitor what the media is saying about you, whether it be on websites or in social media. I pretend to golf. I don't practice enough. Probably most golfers don't, but this is a reminder that you need to practice those plans. And you can do those, as I mentioned earlier, tabletop drills, getting your key folks in a room, walking through a scenario, whether with or without an outside facilitator, and sort of seeing how folks react to what is going on. You can do full-scale drills. Folks like us run full-scale drills for organizations where you develop a scenario. The key players, all they know is that on November the 8th, they've got a crisis drill blocked out. They have no idea what the scenario is. On November the 8th, they get something dropped on their desk that says XYZ happened, and they're in, until we work through the entire process, they go through a full dress rehearsal of what a crisis drill, what a crisis response might actually be. So practice, practice, practice. This is actually, in terms of holding statements, something in terms of practicing. I'm going to pull up this here because I'm never going to be able to read it on that. But anybody remember Bill Safire? So Bill Safire was in the Nixon White House. And this is actually a holding statement in terms of practice that was prepared in case the Apollo moon landing did not come back. And so it's a fantastic example of being prepped for something and practicing what might happen. It's also a fantastic piece from a person who does holding statements and do statements. It's a fantastic piece of writing. So it's, fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery, but they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most noble goal, search for truth and understanding. And it goes on, the point again being it's a great way of prepping for something, and the cover memo to it explains exactly what Nixon is to do and when. So this is readily available. When you leave it at night, you want to Google it to see the full text. Again, giving you the idea, as you said, prior to, the president should telephone each of the widows to be prior to the releasing of the statement. So they lived what you were actually supposed to do in terms of being ready for what you hope never happens. Practice also prevents things like this. You guys are all probably familiar with the Quebec train crash earlier this year that killed roughly 36 folks. This was the interview given by the CEO of the company. So the two statements, I enlarged sort of the two things that when you're doing practice, one of the things is you got to media train your people so that they understand what your messages are and work well in an environment of stress. So you don't say something like this because what I'm about to show you now, that's not an unfortunate incident. That's way more than an unfortunate incident, and it's one of those things, again, where you derail, no pun intended, your company by saying, I think we've blown it here. I would imagine you have. They fumbled their way through it. We didn't just sort of pick one quote. We could have picked several quotes from that whole response if you remember the incident. But the point being, again, practice with including media training. There's a cheat sheet, and leave you with a little funny. As we talked about, we get along well with lawyers. Most PR people have sort of bridged the gap, but you try to avoid some kind of this, again, because speed is critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. That was excellent. So Thomas set a broad context for us, really kind of a high-level review of what a solid communication plan looks like. And now we'll dive down to the county level, if you will, and hear from Larry how counties can recommend an emergency plan for their area, but perhaps also in partnership with other organizations. So, Larry, you're not using this, but every once in a while, if you do that, that might be helpful to keep
Keep it alive.
Keep it alive. Right?
Actually, you know what? Tom, can I use one of your slides?
Certainly may.
Yeah. You did it, the PowerPoint. There you go. You got it.
It was totally uncoordinated. Or actually, I should say, I used this to build my presentation to you tonight. My brain works better when I can use things to help me remember. So I did the who, what, when, where, why. Pulled that together to help me get things squared away. And if I put together a PowerPoint package, it probably would have looked a lot like Tom's. Okay? In the beginning, he talked about the different modes of response, reassessment, recovery. We use I use the FEMA tradition, or actually they changed the tradition because we had 4 phases of emergency management. Now we have 5. And that's kind of one of the gender of why do we communicate. And one of the things I really want to get across is we communicate to try to restore normal. Sometimes people say that our job is one of bringing order out of chaos, which is very true. Paul and I spent 6 days together. We reaffirmed this tonight. We spent 6 days together in an all-hazard incident management team program, which is a group of guys that you get together and you throw them into the fire and let them kind of sort it all out. And really what you're trying to do is get control of something that's not controlled. And through that, you restore order. And through that, you restore normal. Now, the thing I would pose to all of you, people who want to be municipal, and county, and city managers, what's normal? I hear some chuckles. What is normal? You all need to know this, because this is your target. Right? Your job will not be done until you're there. Normal is your residents are sitting on their couch, watching their TV, drinking their beer. Okay? Until you do that, their life is not normal. Agreed? So you can say, well, we restored power to 95% of the town. For 5% of the people, that isn't good enough. And you'll hear about it. So I ask you to remember that as you go on, that normal is where you need to be. Normal is your end game, normal is your goal. I mean, we set all kinds of lofty goals and objectives when we do incident management. We said we want to restore, what was one of the things that we called? We had to lower the volume of the dam or something like that, and how we were gonna do that with whatever combination of things. That's just a stepping stone. We gotta get to the end game, which is at what point is everybody happy? So we look at why we communicate. We communicate to talk about preparedness. We communicate to talk about protection. And by the way, these are the phases of emergency management as FEMA defines them now. We communicate about response. Now largely that's directed at our responders to tell them what they need to do. We communicate about recovery. When I do that, I'm pointing it at people like Bruce, municipal managers, and I'm saying, I need to know how many of your homes are destroyed. How many of your homes have major damage? How many have minor damage? How many of them are just affected? Because that's important for me in terms of getting recovery money to come in. Because once the event's over, and even while the event's still going on, what's important? We gotta feed the machine. The machine needs money. We have to provide information to get the money. So I send out messaging about that to start to work that recovery. Because if we don't do the recovery, as Tom pointed out, long-term recovery is just that. It may not happen at the end of the day. It may not happen at the end of the week. It may go on for months. We talked about continuity of operations plans. They're extremely critical in that, because if you can't carry on, you can't recover. So if you haven't planned for how you're gonna move forward, once half of everything's wiped out, you got a big problem. So that's something you have to look at. When are we gonna communicate? We do extended pre-event communication. If you've been paying attention to the news, you've started to see some of that coming up now, right? The little teasers, I think actually one of the stations tonight at 11, they're gonna talk about what the winter's gonna be. That's extended pre-event communication. My guys, I often get snide emails coming back at me as I send out the latest forecast from the National Weather Service. And for some reason, they always seem to come out on Friday afternoons. And they're like, gee, thanks for making our weekend, But, I'm doing what I can. I'm trying to put it out there and making sure that they have the best information they can to make decisions. We have seen that when we do that and folks take that information and work with it, they have reduced flooding. We've had folks go out. We had a small storm that came in. One town went out. They strapped everything down. They got people to secure, the construction guys to secure all their materials, got loose stuff picked up, taken away. They took all kinds of debris out of there. They went out and cleaned some drains in places where it usually floods. And you know what? It worked. The places that flood didn't, nothing got destroyed because stuff was flying around through the air. So that warning helps. And that's one of the things we try to communicate. Right before an event, what kind of message do you think we're gonna send? Run, hide, duck, okay? The big one's coming. If you didn't go out and shop, it's too late, okay? French toast weekend coming up. During an event, again, this tends to get us into some of the stuff that's more difficult. We had a very large fire at a propane and other bottled gas facility in our, and those of you who, if you Google or go to YouTube and look up propane fire at Collingdale, you'll see the videos. Propane cylinders flying through the air. We sent out messaging there. We wanted to clear a half-mile circle around that place. We sent out messaging to do that. So that's the kind of stuff you'll see during an event. A lockdown. Our system here, for the students, our system here is the same in the county and in the region, is the same as your system on campus. I can push a message into my system, and it comes out through Nova Alert to you guys. And that would be really be the one that'd be like duck, run, hide, okay? So that kind of stuff will happen during. Immediately after, we may provide direction. We've opened a shelter at this location. This road is closed. This bridge is washed out. You know, if you have damages, please report them to your local municipality. That's the kind of stuff that we'll do. And as we go through the recovery process, we'll have those messages kind of continuing. You know, a disaster recovery center is going to open at a particular township building. All right? Constantly communicating. And having those plans is very important to get making that work. Having those messages already scripted is very important. What are we going to send? What messages? Preparatory messages, right? Get ready. Warning, alerts, National Weather Service warnings, tornado alerts. We send those out. We have those automated. National Weather Service sends one of them to us. It goes right back out through our system to the people who want to get weather alerts. You know, we're able to do some of that. So for us, it's totally seamless. We take the Weather Service warning, we put it right back out. Requests for information, like I said. You know, this was destroyed, you know, tell us what your damages are. We're looking for a certain person. An Amber Alert is a request for information. We're trying to find somebody, help us. We give instruction, right, shelters, and we dispatch our responders. You know, primarily we use our public safety radio to do that, but we can also dispatch some of our volunteer groups like the Red Cross, our community emergency response teams, our volunteer groups, volunteers organized and active in disaster, our county emergency, county animal response teams. You know, all those groups, we use messaging to do that. How do we communicate? In the beginning, there were press releases, right? Copy due by 10, or whenever. I guess actually it used to be more often because they had more editions of the paper, which some people were going to go, really? The morning edition, the afternoon edition, the late edition. You know, there were 3 different copies of the bulletin that came out. Not anymore. It just all goes online. Actually, there's no bulletin anymore, so scratch that. We use sirens, right? How many people are from the Midwest? Anybody? Anybody? What did you do the first time around here you heard a siren? Did that just send a chill right up your back? Because what were you thinking? Tornado. Here we blow sirens for all kinds of goofy reasons. It's, you know, it could be, well, it's Monday at noon, it's curfew, there's a fire call, could be lunchtime at the refinery. You know, so for us anymore, sirens aren't an effective means of communication. And you have to bear that in mind. Emergency alerting system, right, that came next, you know, the tone on the TV set or on the radio. Now here's the bonus question. Who knows what the primary emergency alert radio station in southeastern, or I should say the greater Philadelphia market is? Wrong. How many of you thought that? Don't be embarrassed. Okay.
Is it Q102?
Secondary.
Wow. Kids.
Or actually not Q102, MGK 102.9.
102.9.
WHYY is the primary emergency alerting system. Okay? Trivia, I know. But if you want the information first, you gotta listen to NPR, I guess. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, we use NOAA weather radios, right? The ubiquitous Cube that you get from Radio Shack. They have nicer versions. You know, and it sits there and it's quiet. And suddenly it makes a noise and it starts giving you a weather report. Is that important? Heck yeah, listen to that. See what it's trying to tell you. Because it's got a good message to it. Then we have our Ready Notify system that's across the 5-county area. The regional task force bought that with DHS money. In Delaware County, we call it Delco Alert. Like I said, on Villanova's campus, they call it Nova Alert. The system works well. It's email, text, and it also does voice. Voice isn't that good of a message. Everybody goes, oh, we gotta have voice. Do you know how long it takes to deliver a voice message to a population of several thousand people? A long time. It works by, just envision the computer has an arm and it has to reach out, it picks up a phone, right? Dial tone comes on. It dials the number. Something answers on the other side, be it a human or another machine. It delivers the message, then it hangs up and clears the line, right? Because if you ever notice, you hang the phone up real fast and you pick it back up real fast, and they're still there, right? Because it didn't clear the line yet. It takes a little time to do that. That's the time for connected, that span is one message. So imagine it has to do that for as many people as you have on that call list. It can take a lot of time to deliver that message. To the point that if you're the person at the end of the line, you could not get there in time to help you. There's a lot that has to deal with the quality, the quantity of calling lines that they have available and all this stuff. That's why we don't really like it for mass notification. It's okay for a little spot group, a limited population, it can work well. But for large populations, it's going to take time. We find even with the text, which goes out much quicker, it still takes time when you're sending text out to 10,000 people. You know, you just got to think about it a little bit. New things coming up. Integrated public alerting and warning system, IPAWS. This allows us a lot more availability to send emergency alert messages, because right now it's very difficult and it's very painful for us at the county level to send a message. We kind of have to either go to one of the primary stations in the system, WHYY or MGK, and say, can you send this? Or we have to go to PEMA and they send a message for us. But this system will allow us to, even to the point of, I could be sitting at home, if I have the proper credentials, I can get into the system and I can type up a message real quick and the robo voice will repeat it on the system. The next piece of that is the Commercial Mass Alerting System, CMAS. And what that will do is, everyone's familiar with how cell phones work, right? There's a tower, there's a circle around the tower where it catches phones. We tell the system what towers we want to send a message. We give it a message, it sends it to every single phone in that area. Regardless of carrier, regardless of plan, the message will be delivered. Pretty potent tool, not quite there yet, it's, you know, kind of still in process, but it will be a good tool when we get there. And then we get back to social media. And it is important, like Tom said, it's important to have people who know how to use that tool. At our level, we need people who know how to use the tools that manage the tools. Because as you have Facebook and you have Twitter, there are systems and applications that let you monitor Twitter and Facebook, things like Hootsuite and others that will let you see what people are talking about and where they're talking about them, so that you can kind of monitor kind of the flow of what's going on out there. Because you can't be subscribed to everything, and you can't be subscribed to everybody who's tweeting. But with these systems, it lets you kind of pick up what the undercurrents are, you know, what the hashtags are, and what's going on there. So it's important to have folks who can manage that degree of the system. And in my defense, I sit there and I tell people, I did not see a personal computer until I was out of college, which apparently Tom and I walked past each other at Penn State. Did you take personal computing while you were there?
I did not.
I did. Now here's the funny thing. Personal computing at that time, key punch machine. Everybody know what a key punch machine is? Puts the little holes in the cards, right? And a card deck reader. And I learned 3 really important things doing it. You need to have really good rubber bands. You have to number your cards, and you have to number them in pencil. And those were the things I learned about personal computing. They're looking at me like, what? Because you didn't want the bundle to break. Because you'd sit there and you'd have to painstakingly type all these cards, right? Because it all didn't go on just one card. It was a whole stack. You get a stack like this. Line by line by line. And then you put them in the machine, the card deck reader, and it would run all through, and then it would go, nope, you didn't do it right. So you'd have to go back and fix, which usually meant you had to take the card out, put another in, or maybe put 2 in. So now if you numbered all of your cards in ink, you crossed them out. That's why you had to number them. Well, you had to number them in case the rubber band broke when you dropped them. They're everywhere. And you had to number in pencil so that you could change the numbers as you tried to debug your program, which was going to let you play hangman or something like that.
That's why I didn't take the class.
You were smart. Me, dummy, took it. Okay? So, that's why I said, I didn't grow up with computers. I grudgingly used them. Somehow people think I'm some kind of technical genius, and I'm like, really? No. No. I get to a point, and I reach under my desk, and I pull the hammer out, at which point the tech guys are, no, don't do it. But I want to just beat them. So social media is very important to what you're going to do. And we use it to do outbound messaging. We don't really do inbound. We have Facebook pages. We have a Twitter account. And with the notification system, we actually have them all kind of tied together so that an alert goes out, be it a weather alert, traffic alert, whatever case may be, it goes out, it goes to the Facebook page, it appears there, it goes to the Twitter account, it goes out through that. I like that. Does it all by itself. Okay? But that's the critical piece of it. You've got to start to do that. Now, the problem we get into now is that I went to the Emergency Management Conference, the International Association Conference, and listened to a lot of folks talking about Facebook and Twitter and texting. And texting, we have a problem with texting. Like everyone's, well, we got to text 911 calls. It doesn't work. How do we keep that person, how do we know where they are? How do we because in our communication center, we transfer calls. How do you transfer text? No one's explained that to us yet. It doesn't really work. So we're not really sure how to make that one happen. But we're looking at things that have happened during Sandy. Fire Department of New York, out on Long Island. Their policy is they don't respond to text. They don't respond to Twitter. Their 911 system went out. It was gone. There's nothing left. Firehouses are underwater. You can't even run to the firehouse and get help. So what do? They started tweeting. And enough people were retweeting this stuff that it started to come across the public information officer's desk for the New York City Fire Department. So they actually had to start responding to Twitter requests for assistance because there was no other way for folks to get it. So you've got to be flexible in what you're going to do because that's really going to be the crux of it. When we talk about NIMS, and anybody who's had a NIMS class knows that NIMS needs to be flexible, NIMS needs to be scalable, it needs to adapt. And that's really kind of the message is you have to be prepared to do that. Now, who do we talk to? Public, and we do it by groups and locations. We talk about geoshapes or shape files, which literally means we just walk up and we drew a box and we want the message to go there. We do groups. Like we talked about our different responder groups. It could be folks that want to get public health alerts, folks that want to get weather alerts, folks that want to get traffic alerts. So we communicate in those 2 different ways to the public. We communicate to our local government partners because we need to keep them in the loop. You know, I know I send out a lot of stuff, which Bruce can admit to or not, and I'm sure you get a lot from Scott and his guys. You know, they probably pepper you with stuff. And we do that because the information comes down through us and we share it out to where it needs to go. And then the stakeholder groups that we talked about, volunteer groups, Red Cross, Salvation Army, all those folks who want to do good works, but we need to kind of coordinate what they do. And then mutual aid resources, county to county, state to state, you know, we need to talk to them and communicate with them as well. Some things that happen that are important to remember when you're communicating, particularly in this type of thing where you're not looking at them, you're just kind of pushing it off into cyberspace and hoping it gets there. You got to validate the message. You know, there's a lot of debunking that has to occur, particularly with social media stuff. Anybody saw the picture of the subway escalators, and at the bottom of the escalators there's sharks swimming around? Fake. The eye over the Statue of Liberty? Fake. Stuff getting pushed out at light speed, but it has to be debunked. Boston Marathon. At the time of the Boston Marathon, there was a brief little blip when I think somebody hacked AP. And suddenly, there were AP reports that shots were fired at the White House. And that just turned everybody upside down for about 15 minutes until somebody realized what had happened and said, oh, no, we didn't send that. World Trade Center. Anybody remember the Yahoos they called? Remember when they started resorting to call in and tell us what you think? And they learned that that wasn't a really good idea, just to put anybody on the phone, because people were calling in and go, oh, yeah. And some people were like, you know, yeah, they're better off dead. Everybody's like, oh, holy crap, how do we do that? So there really needs to be validation of the message. When you start something, you got to end it. You know, my boss likes to tell a story of a township police department that put schools on lockdown because an incident went on. They forgot to tell the schools, well, there was one private school that got the message. They told the public schools that it was over, but they forgot to tell the private school. Private school stayed on lockdown. Dismissal time came, they stayed on lockdown. 6 o'clock at night, we call the radio room and say, are we still on lockdown? And the supervisor didn't even try to answer the question. They just called the police chief and said, you better go handle this. So, yeah. You know, you got to make sure once you start something, you close it. You know, you see it requires maintenance and feeding. You got to update it, take care of it along the way. Message is not clear and specific. You know, you really have to think about what you're sending out. You got to make sure that it's easily understood by everybody. So that means it's devoid of abbreviations, it's devoid of acronyms. It is dumbed down to the lowest possible level, and it's very clear as to what it means and what it says. And you flat out miss your audience. You know, particularly when you're sending stuff out to groups and shapes and this thing and everything. If you miss one of the audiences that you need to target, you got a bunch of people who don't have the message. So, but I will tell you that we love circles, and like your first slide, you know, we actually even at one point we started calling them the wheels of death, because everything we had like a revolving circle. And the important part of that is that everything we do, there isn't really a stopping point. It just keeps moving along. Planning process, incident management, communication plans, whatever you're doing, they are always moving, they are always alive. And like Tom said, somebody hands you a plan, like people come to me all the time and say, could you review my plan? I usually go to the part where people's names are listed. And I start going and I say, who's Larry Bob? Oh, he retired 3 months ago. I take the plan and I go, okay, here. Well, why are you going to, no, here. Because it's not updated. So you always have to update your plans.
Great. All right, I welcome Paul up here to speak about it from a township manager's point of view and some incidents. He has a clip he's gonna show, right? Do you want me to bring that clip up?
Yeah, don't start it, bring it up, but don't start it,
Okay,
that'd be great.
so I'm just gonna, you just click on that and it'll come up when you're ready.
I'm ready. No, don't click it.
I won't.
Okay.
Just, and
I'll find
every
it.
once in a while I'll move that thing and that'll be cool.
Thank you. My name's Paul Leonard. It's my pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to eat these cookies. Thank you. They're really, somebody mentioned that they're famous and they're great. I really am humbled to be here and to follow up these guys. They really are technical experts, and I'm a generalist. So, and it's also kind of fun to be back at a Catholic university, and that's because I think probably the best thing I can do is use some of the stories. Catholic University would know the power of parables of stories. So I can tell you a few stories from my experience in communication and emergency management. And just as Larry did, you know, I think those things might be some of the things that you remember the longest. For the city managers in the room, you know that our association, ICMA, is constantly talking about the power of stories. They're actually encouraging CEOs or city managers to tell more stories because they are so powerful and can stick with people so long. And you know, the stories are real. The stories are real, just as you said about normal or disasters happening. Today is the 100th anniversary of the White Hurricane. This was 90-mile-an-hour winds on Lake Huron in Michigan, killed 250 sailors today. 90-mile-an-hour winds, 35-foot waves, took out all those ships and then went down. They'd never seen anything like it. 100th anniversary today. How many have seen the news about what's going into the Philippines right now? 190-mile-an-hour winds, 230-mile-an-hour gusts. I didn't see the gusts, but Larry mentioned that. That'll scrape the earth clean. It'll scour. It'll take those buildings out. Rob, you've been to the Philippines. They don't have much of buildings anyways in some of the areas. This is in the south. And they've already called for help. It'll be devastating. There's no doubt about it. If you get a chance to look at it, all the news media now has pictures of it. This thing has a perfect eye, and these people are in very, very serious trouble. It'll be thousands, possibly tens of thousands dying. So those are real events, and what I could do is maybe tell you a few stories, and then if I have time, I'll show you. There's a short YouTube video. It's more about what emergency management managers do. From my little world, in my small world, big fires are kind of what I like to do. I'm a city manager. Today I'm taking care of, you know, how many deer are dead on the street. We're worried about the next budget. I live in a very mundane world, but I really would have liked to have been a fire chief. And my avocation as a volunteer firefighter and that kind of stuff allowed me to play around with emergencies. And I also get to go to big fires on a team, a volunteer team for the county. So in terms of crisis communication, as a communicator, I've ended up not so much as a PIO, but I've had the ability to work with good PIOs, and I know what they are, and they're excellent to have people who can write like that. But in 1988, I was a manager of a small town in Bucks County called Percy. It had a large fire, and it was the closest thing I've ever seen to a conflagration, and that's like the Great Boston Fire or San Francisco Fire. We thought it was going to burn down the whole town. It generated its own wind. We lost 3 or 4 city blocks, and I literally thought that it was going to jump and start to consume the entire town. We had flaming brands being landed. We found out later that they could track the smoke from the fire all the way from Bucks County to the Chesapeake. And it was just jumping, and it was the scariest thing I've ever been at. And I was there as a firefighter and as a town manager. And we went into recovery mode, and that's when we got national news. Little tiny town, this is like 12,000 people at the time. And one of the lessons I'd leave you with, one of the stories I'd leave you with is that you've got to be true to the media that you know, particularly with the reporters. Don't abandon the folks that cover you on an everyday basis. We had this devastating area. The governor came in, and we had all these charred buildings, and we had cranes tearing stuff down, and everybody's really freaked out that we almost burned down the whole town and almost didn't stop it. And I was at the boundaries with the elected officials, and somebody showed up at the time with a CNN sticker on their camera. And in the 80s, CNN was a big deal. And I watched my elected officials go gaga. And it turned out that the sticker was on like a crew that was hired. It wasn't like really CNN. There wasn't any CNN TV star there. But just that sticker, and the president of the town council lifted the yellow tape and walked these guys up. Meanwhile, I'm back there holding back the people I work with on a daily basis. So I think you get the point. You know, they're looking at us and say, what are we, chopped liver? But you know what? The long-term story, in fact, how history is going to be written and what your residents or your citizens are going to see are written by the locals.
The national press you might be able to control, and you have to do all the good things these guys talked about, but you have to stay true to that. So there's one story for you. Conshohocken fire was actually declared as a national disaster. This was about, what was it, 2 years ago, Gav? 300-foot flame heights right on the Schuylkill River 2 years ago. I got there within about 20
Move the mouse a little bit, excuse me. Move the mouse.
Move the mouse, okay.
Move the mouse. You got it.
Okay. I got there about 20 minutes into it, and 300-foot flame heights. 300-foot flame heights is a big-ass fire. I'll just leave it at that. And it turned out what it was buildings under construction, and they were still all sticks and wood. So it's like a giant piling of kindling. And some guy with a torch or a cutter set this thing. So there's things burning, and it's catching on to these other occupied lightweight construction buildings along the river. And I got assigned, not so much as PIO. We had the county had sent a PIO on. The fire's still burning. There's fire companies from everywhere. There's hoses all over. All these people are just relocated. And I remember I got with the borough council president. I'm not official there, but I'm on his team. And it was a woman, and I really talked to her. I gave her all my best advice that I give to people when they're going into crisis communication. And one of the things I give, and one of the stories comes from Wilson Good. He was the mayor of Philadelphia during the MOVE incident. And again, MOVE is a historic incident, a very bad one, where the police in Philadelphia dropped a bomb, set a fire, and burned down blocks and blocks on a revolutionary group that was held up in West Philly. And it was terrible. Children were killed, and it was a real disaster. And Wilson Good was the mayor at the time. And actually, Wilson Good, in hindsight, did a pretty good job of handling the media on that. And the axiom, or the thing that he used, a story that's stuck with me, and it's one that I explained to the borough council president in Conshohocken, is, don't get into details because you may not know them. Good PIOs are people that are thoughtful, that are careful. They are not the daredevils. They have credibility with the press, and they write it out. They don't wing it. Now, I'm the daredevil. I'll wing it. I'll go out there and think I could do a good job, but I do have the judgment. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. I do have the judgment to at least talk to a PIO and have good people around me backing me up. So I said to him the same thing that Wilson Good said. When in doubt, you can do two things in that crisis, as a public official, as anybody saying. Assert and affirm, 2 A's. Assert. This is a very serious fire. Now, you're not really saying anything people don't know, but you need to let people know that you know that basic fact, that you're not minimizing it, that it is a big deal. And affirm, and you'll see this in well-written, well-crafted, spur-of-the-moment things where people are under pressure. Affirm, we're doing everything we can right now to deal with this, to bring us back to normal. Or you'll see a classic line, we're going to bring to bear all the resources of the United States. You'll see President Obama say that. And you know what? It's in a way it's platitudes, in a way it's dodging, but it's also things that need to be said. And a good PIO, a good crisis communication needs to say that. Assert, this is really a bad day. People are getting killed, or this terrible thing happened. You need to assert that because somebody has to say it to give it those words to life. Another Catholic school thing, the power of the word. You have to say it. But the assert is also that you have to say the truth, that we're bringing to bear all the resources when necessary. Or affirm that we are trying to gather as much information about this unknown event. Because the concept of fog of war is true. As a firefighter, when I was at Conshohocken and these other things, there's a whole lot of stuff you don't know. And you're getting information, you may be getting it from these multiple sources, but you don't know it, so affirm that we're gathering as much information as we can. And that's one of the other issues about crisis communication that's really critical, and I know these guys know it. You gotta be truthful. Because boy, I tell you, even a small lie will slam you. I mean, just a small lie, even if you fudge any of it. So let's say tell some more stories. We have the role of knowing your audience. About 3 years ago, we were called to Pottstown, and I love being a firefighter, and I get there, but the fire pretty much burned out. But I had a gear on and we're all set, and the only assignment that came to me was, you have to go down and wait for the Red Cross at the shelter where these people had been sent. What had burned was a really big mansion that had been used as a single-room occupancy type hotel or motel. So I end up, and it's absolutely like a Disney scene. And Montgomery County is an affluent county. Pottstown is not an affluent part of it. And it's like a Disney scene. It's this storefront Baptist ministry with the preachers there, and there's chairs, and they're serving coffee, and I come in, and I'm not a chief. I'm not an officer. I'm just a lowly firefighter. I'm there to help. But no one had talked to these people. And it turned out that the property was really being used as a halfway house for mentally challenged people, not just mentally retarded, but also people with serious mental illness problems. And they latched on to me like you couldn't believe for information. And I realized pretty quickly, because I had worked in a mental hospital for a few years through high school, you know, you could tell these people are on Thorazine, or they should be on Thorazine or lithium or whatever. You could see it in their eyes. And they were so open about it. They said, you know, meet my boyfriend. He's bipolar. That's how he was introduced. And they said, Chief, can you tell us what's going on? And the Red Cross is 45 minutes out. I know, because they're just going to send 2 people in a car. One will speak Spanish, the other English, and they might help us out. But they're not coming to big help. And again, my experience and life experience, and you need to remember this as part of the story, bring to bear your own personality, your own life experiences, your own judgment about people in these situations, and it will help carry the day. So the minister said, stand up and talk. And I explained to him, you know, you're not going to be getting back into your home or your room. It might be gone. The firefighters are still there. If you need medication, we're going to send you to the hospital. I'm not going to let you go back and try to find it, even if your room's up, because we're not doctors. We're going to do that. You're going to have to hold on. You know, we'll have help coming. You know, to take care of each other, those kinds of things. And it was a great experience, and I just related to you not so much about what I did or how well I did or didn't do it, but that axiom, that story is draw from what you know. Use your best skills. Use your base, because people can pick that up. And you know, interestingly, these people are challenged, and it's a great thing. I work with sophisticated people. I have doctors and attorneys and engineers in every corner of my town. I deal with the most intelligent people all the time. But those folks picked up on the truth of what I was saying, and it was just wonderful, and I give them all the credit for it. You know, they got it. This guy's trying to help us out, help us come, and all those kind of things to get them back to normalcy. So there's another story. Last story, because I would rather handle questions than answers. And you had asked me to talk about Facebook and all that other stuff. We can do that later. But it was Superstorm Sandy. That was last year, October. What was it? October 29th, something like that. And in that case, what I saw was that you never know who's going to be of real value, who's going to really hold up and do well. In this case, we were without, most of our communities were without power 4 days. We had some people 6 or 7 days out of power. And Upper Dublin, affluent community, big houses, they get real cold and whatever. And one of the great lessons on that about, you know, you never know who's going to do well, who's going to survive, who's going to step up. We had a 98-year-old woman on Twining Road. Her nearest relative was in South Jersey, which was even worse shape. They were able to get a message to us that they were worried about Grandma, but she was on her own. And we started sending code enforcement people out to check on her. And it got to the point where this woman actually said, Boise, I really appreciate you coming by, and I'm fine. You know, I got gas stove, and I'm just spending a lot more time under the quilts upstairs. I'm reading. Don't even bother checking on me. She was great. And I contrast or juxtapose that to and I have a raft of these emails in my file. I keep files and some of the stuff. From a roughly 40-something-year-old dad in the Drescher section with great homes, whatever, who emailed me and the elected officials till we were ready to die, talking about how hazardous it was in his neighborhood, how his kids were driving him nuts, how if you don't get my freaking TV or cable on, you know, I'm going to kill someone. It just went on and on and on, long emails. It then developed conspiracy theories about, you know, the next town's got power, we don't. Or if such and such street has power, they must have political Jews, they got Pico to do this. It was like really going into craziness.